This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The US redirected its aircraft carrier to the waters near the DPRK, and the DPRK conducted another missile test. Where is the Korean Peninsula situation heading? A military parade marked the 105th anniversary of the birth of the country's founder, Kim Il-sung. What will the DPRK's next move be as the 85th anniversary of the founding of the Korean People's Army approaches? And what implications will it have? With all options on the table, will the US make a preemptive strike against the DPRK? US Vice President Mike Pence warned Pyongyang not to test the resolve of President Donald Trump.
We're going to give our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard the resources you need and deserve to accomplish the mission you are given and come home safe. That's a promise from your Commander-in-Chief.
How will it react if the DPRK conducts a new round of nuclear testing? To ensure peace and stability, denuclearization may be the only solution.
We call on all parties to refrain from provoking and threatening each other, whether in words or actions, and not let the situation get to an irreversible and unmanageable stage. Meanwhile, we remain open to any positive suggestions from all sides. The format of the meeting can be flexible. China is willing to support talks in all forms.
What are the ongoing challenges to the process?
Well, tensions have been escalating on the Korean Peninsula in the past week. On Monday, in his visit to South Korea, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence warned Pyongyang not to test the resolve of President Donald Trump. In face of this already dangerous state of affairs, observers are trying to assess the situation and come up with some way to successfully manage a peaceful outcome. To discuss the many issues related to this, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Mr. Yang Xiyu, Senior Research Fellow at China Institute of International Studies, and Mr. Malik Ayub Sumbal, a Pakistani journalist and senior analyst at the DPRK. We'll also be talking to Professor Vladimir Kazin at Russian Academy of Military Sciences in Moscow via telephone. That is our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Li Chuan, sitting in for Yang Rui. All right, the missile launches kind of had the region, the world on edge. The most recent one failed, yes, but it still rattled nerves. What is the country's missile capability now, Mr. Yang? How real is the threat to the world?
Well, according to the record of the series of missiles tests, I think the level of the missile developed remain at the poor level, pretty low, with characteristics of unreliable, unstable qualities. For example, last year they tested the H Musudan missile that was middle range, and they tested 8 times. Only 1 time was successful, and the one successful test was not the last one among the 8, but in the middle. And after the successful test, they repeated, and the failure and the failure. And the latest test you mentioned was failed, and the previous one, 11 days earlier, also failed. So basically, in terms of the short-term missiles, North Korea does commanded a high-qualified missile. But in terms of middle range, quite poor. And in terms of ICBM, yet to be developed.
But the real concern, I suppose, for the United States is the parade over the weekend and what people spotted in that parade. Observers say that they saw something that could be a long-range ballistic missile, canisters that large enough to house missiles capable of hitting continental U.S. You're an expert on this, Mr. Sumbal. Do you think those missiles are real? What do we know about the country's strike capability for sure?
I don't think so that the North Korea missiles are a real threat for anyone, especially in the Asia-Pacific and also for the United States and its allies. But this is some sort of an excuse of the United States to come into this region at this time, when we can see that they are, as compared when the U.S. installment into the Seoul about this, the third deployment. So when we can see and when we can compare, I think that it's not much threat as compared to the third, because the Russia and the China has the very severe reservations about these installments into the South Korea for the surveillance. So I don't think so that North Korea has some sort of the real threat in the Asia Pacific.
So you don't think the North Korea is pretty close to get a warhead on CBM? You agree with that, Mr. Yang?
Yes. Let me put it this way. They have determined to command the ICBM reliable, deliverable ICBM. However, they haven't got a real test, especially a successful test, no. Although they have got several satellite launch by rocket. But rocket launching is different from the ICBM launching, simply because of the former is a lack of the re-entry phase.
So how possible is it for the DPRK to have a nuclear weapon that can reach the United States, which is making the U.S. considering a preemptive strike?
Well, at least up to today, nobody, even President Trump, doesn't believe DPRK can deliver a nuclear bomb onto the continent of the United States. Neither the States nor the Hawaii Islands, no. So basically, at the most, they can say, oh, that was a potential threat. But if they say they want to remove North Korean threats that threats U.S. continent, that's an excuse.
Okay. Now, we have Professor Vladimir Kozin from Russia Academy of Military Sciences joining us from Moscow. Thank you for joining us, sir. Now, Russia hopes the United States will not use force unilaterally against the DPRK, and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said this on Monday. How do you evaluate Russia's performance on the Korean Peninsula situation so far?
I think that nuclear exchanges by using nuclear weapons by both sides, by North Korea and the United States, is impossible. But at the same time, I believe that the United States can use conventional weapons, long-range, pinpoint accuracy conventional weapons against certain installations in the North Korea. So that's why, because this threat is imminent, I mean, the countries concerned, Beijing, the People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation, should urge key players in this crisis, namely North Korea and the United States of America, to exercise restraint and display patience, and to resort to direct talks, but not to exchange some political statements that they are ready to use formidable power, as they used to say.
But would it be helpful for Russia to get involved in the picture?
Yes, Russia should also be involved, but in political sense of view, in political sense, I mean, through negotiations. And I think that if our respective presidents, the president of the PRC and the president of the Russian Federation, could approach the leaders of North Korea and the United States even by urgent telephone calls, and urge them to stay calm and not to heighten tension, that would be the most welcomed scenario and the most welcomed step forward in the right direction.
And how does Russia feel about the current U.S.-Russia relationship? Because Donald Trump is saying it is at an all-time low after what happened in Syria. What does Russia think about this? Is it possible for Russia to work with U.S. on this Korean Peninsula issue?
Yes, I think that we have to try even a small step forward in this direction, though we have a lot of problems with the United States of America. Suffice to say that in the arms control domain, we are still having 16 unresolved issues with Washington. They are very alarming. And unfortunately, unlike in the first stage of the Cold War, we are still having with Washington full deadlock, full cul-de-sac, no movement in terms of resolving key arms control issues. But nevertheless, we should talk to them directly and not to exercise military might in the vicinity of the Korean People's Democratic Republic, because it irritates Pyongyang. It is obvious.
All
Studio?
right. Many thanks, Professor Vladimir Kazan, joining us on the phone from Moscow.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Is it helpful to get Russia involved, Mr. Yang? How much of a role can Russia play?
Basically, a political role in this whole course of the denuclearization in peaceful manner. During the past six-party talks process, a Russian delegation played a very important and professional role in forging consensus and agreement, joint statement among parties. And especially China and Russian delegation had a very good coordination and cooperation in the very sophisticated negotiations about the six-party talks. And under the current situation, by the same token, both Russia and China strongly oppose any efforts by North Korea towards the nuclearization. But at the same time, the two countries also strongly oppose any actions, provocative actions from any of the parties that will contribute negatively to the peace and stability, because both of the countries hate to see any kind of conflicts and instabilities in this very vital region.
And how do you see this? Will the dynamics between Russia and U.S. play into this?
Of course, because Russia is, I think, the major stakeholder into this DPRK issue, and of course they have to be taken into confidence. And as the Professor Vladimir was telling, that this could be help into the diplomatic dialogue and for the peaceful denuclearization and overall the peaceful manners to solve this issue, rather than to have any intervention against North Korea or from the North Korea to any other South Korea or Japan, because no one can accept the confrontation and some tension in the region.
And North Korea is still expected to launch that underground nuclear test. But the urgent question is, Mr. Yang, how far along is DPRK's nuclear program now at this stage?
Well, firstly, compared with their poor development of a missile program, their nuclear program is going pretty successful. Up to now, to my knowledge, they have manipulated the nuclear bomb, but made by plutonium. And now they are preparing a bigger bomb test. I'm very worried the possible test will be a possible hydrogen bomb. If that is the case, that will be produce natural disasters in that mountain area.
Will it affect China?
Of course, because the site is just it's very close to China. The direct distance about 1 kilometer, less than 1 kilometer between the site and one Chinese big city there. So China is very concerned by two aspects. Number one, the further nuclear tests will make the security situation on the peninsula further complicated. And secondly, that is China's solely concern, say, such a test will possibly trigger a huge earthquake that will trigger the secondary natural disasters in that region that will strike peoples across the border, beside both sides of the borders. So basically, they are going to do that, but they have to calculate the consequences, both politically and naturally. Politically, China, Russia, U.S., and the international community will certainly put further sanctions and pressures on North Korea's new tests. On the natural side, they have to concern, because their people there and our people there, they have to be responsible for the lives and the assets of the two peoples in that area. So basically, I think they have determined to develop further the nuclear bombs, but the more and more restraints and the possible consequences waiting ahead.
All right, hold your thoughts. Let's take a short break on Dialogue. We'll be right back for more discussions. Stay with us. Welcome back to Dialogue. So earlier before the break, we were talking about the nuclear program development in DPRK. Is there any way to stop that? Is there anything that we can do to deter them from doing it?
Of course, again, I will say that that is the diplomatic dialogue that could prevent North Korea to do any kind of the untoward incident. Like, because some American scientists, they have some sort of the reports, and they have exposed that the nuclear, the North Korea nuclear program is fastly growing as the outer world predicted. So might be the United States should not have to take North Korea like Syria or Afghanistan, because they bombed Syria, then Afghanistan, and then they are going to connect this, that after this, and then North Korea. So I think that this threat could be, or any preemptive move from both sides could lead towards a major tension.
What do you think the DPRK would respond once there was a preemptive strike from the U.S.?
Well, politically, they have set up a doctrine, say, tougher reaction against or respond to tough action. Say, if U.S. Launched a strike, preemptive strike, they will make a stronger response by using the nuclear bomb. Even, as I said, they have no way to deliver the bomb onto the U.S., but they have fully capability to use them against their brother people, the South Korean people. They even can try to deliver onto Japan. Mm-hmm. So basically, any kind of the so-called preemptive military strike, or any format of the military actions by unilateral way will trigger a series of consequences and problems and troubles for this region.
But for the U.S., what's their red line? What will make them say, well, okay, a preemptive strike is absolutely necessary?
I think that U.S. is going to be on both sides, on the diplomatic sides, and on the back end. You can see that from White House, they are saying that they will not go towards any kind of the preemptive strike like this. But on the front, like Mike Pence, he is saying that yesterday it was a big headline into all the media that the era of the strategical patience is over. So I think that this is some sort of the diplomatic tactics to pressurize the North Korea. But I think that personally, I think that the United States is not in a position to take any preemptive strikes against DPRK at this stage.
Do you believe there's still room for negotiation?
Of course, they will lead towards this, because the South Korea new regime, which is going to become, I think that they are not, they might be not in this position, because if you can compare the collateral damage in case of any kind of the tensions, it will be more high in South Korea and Japan rather than the North Korea.
But remember, given the unpredictability of both U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korea leader Kim Jong-un, will Donald Trump's aggressive talks on the DPRK increase the likelihood of a conflict?
Well, with the newly made policy framework announced by window of the opportunity for negotiation remain open, even bigger than before, with the new policy, with the coordination and cooperation between China and U.S. on this Korean Peninsula issue.
Now, U.S. officials keep saying all options are on the table, but is regime change an option for them too? Will the U.S. try to remove Kim from power like what they did in Libya? in Iraq and what they're trying to do in Syria. What do you think?
Of course, the history of the United States to change the regime is not peaceful. So I think that it's not possible. That option is out of question. So it's not possible to change the regime. Because how it's possible? Because whenever the regime is changed, the U.S. has changed the regime by its own style. And that is not peaceful, actually.
Do you agree, Mr. Yang?
Well, the latest development is Pence and his team members announced a new policy, say the U.S., including President Donald Trump, stated that U.S. will not set the regime change as a policy goal. Okay. And at least orally, it's a positive development. And also they said exclude the probability of using military means. They said use all measures short of military means. So it's a good word. But the key question is, you said no regime change, but how let or persuade North Korea to believe that? And we do want denuclearization. But if we really want to denuclearize North Korea in peaceful manner, first thing first is we need to make or let North Korea in confidence to give up nuclear weapon. Say even without a nuclear weapon, they will be safer rather than more unsecured. They will not follow the fate of Saddam Hussein or what happened in Libya or Syria. If they are confident about that, I think the peaceful solution to the nuclear issue will be hopeful or hopeless.
Now, when weighing the possibility of a preemptive strike, what went into the consideration? How worried are they about possible retaliation? Because you mentioned it earlier, this is a very different situation from Syria. The DPRK is able to reach their Asian allies, is able to reach U.S. military assets stationed there. If the DPRK decides to pull the trigger, Osan Air Base will be the first target, which is just 48 miles away.
Of course, in any kind of the preemptive attempts from the both sides, the major targets will be I think that the South Korea or might be the most neighboring countries, the U.S. allies. But as I again mentioned here, that this is not the first time that the U.S. and DPRK is going at this heights of tension. In 1994, the tension was even more than this, and then the U.S. has to be stepped back. So I think that the U.S. will be stepped back, and after these military exercises, I hope that the U.S. These aircraft carrier will go back from where it came.
What do you think of this? Will the U.S. step back? Will the tension die down eventually?
Well, the stories in 1994 was a little bit different from the current situation now. However, U.S. and South Korea should draw a lesson from the crisis in 1994 and the crisis today. Say the more military drills, the more military pressures on North Korea, what will be the result? Say more efforts towards denuclearization rather than the denuclearization. So actually, all military efforts made by U.S. and ROK actually was counterproductive rather than productive. Produce negative results, produce the momentum towards the direction they hate to see. Okay. So U.S., ROK, and all of the international community should rethink what we have done and replan what we should be like and what we should do for the next.
Now, Mike Pence just left South Korea and it's arriving at Tokyo. What do you think can America's ally do in this play? I mean, will we see coordinated response among U.S., Japan, and South Korea, a trilateral coordinated response?
Of course, they are already in this trilateral talk and trilateral conversation on North Korea, because this special visit of Mike Pence is actually planned ahead of this, after this the North Korea tension that is created in this region. And in Japan, also he has the same talk about this, the DPRK issue.
But it's also very difficult in the past to get South Korea and Japan cooperate on security matters, Mr. Yang.
Yes, because of the historical reason and the sum of current political reasons. It's very sensitive, not only difficult, but sensitive to even talk about Japan, ROK, political and security cooperation against North Korea. It's quite sensitive inside ROK. Of course, no sensitivity in Japan, but in South Korea. So I think the trilateral military cooperation will be limited. However, the U.S. ROK and the U.S. Japan bilateral the parallel bilateral relation, bilateral cooperation, military cooperation against DPRK will be increased through the Pence's visit to both of the countries.
Now, China's role in it. You hear Donald Trump saying China, China, China all the time. He's basically calling this a Chinese problem located in North Korea. You agree?
No, actually, so many politicians have talked about so long time about China's responsibility or North Korean issue is China's problem. Their logic can be summarized as this. Because China is the biggest provider of assistance to North Korea, so if China cut off completely the assistance, then the nuclear issue will be solved. Such a logic is groundless. Let's imagine even China completely stop all economic assistances, North Korean authority will never ever surrender. Not only North Korea, any sovereign country cannot do that, only by cut off economic assistance. But we will trigger a series of problems and a crisis on humanitarian area. So basically, China will never follow U.S. way, say, for shooting one trouble by making more troubles. We cannot do that way. And we have to maintain a reasonable level of the sentences. Meanwhile, we should input more efforts for the diplomatic and the economic pressures.
And final words from you, Mr. Sumbal. Your thoughts on how China should handle the situation?
Of course, China will not afford some sort of the tensions near its neighborhood, and it is not for any country, because those countries who have the tension near their borders, they will have some problems, law and order problem. So China's stance is absolutely right, and as Donald Trump is saying, China, China all the time. So I think that China has the full cooperation. China is have a full support for the U.S. and the Russia and other alliance to denuclearization, but it should be peaceful manner.
All right, many thanks to you both, Mr. Yang and Mr. Sumbal, joining us in Beijing studio. And that is this edition for Dialogue. Thank you so much for your company. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.